Have you ever felt something watching you, even when you're completely alone? Some places carry a presence, not just memories, not just echoes, but something alive in the silence. Hollowgate Abbey is one of those places. Tucked away in the English countryside, it looks like just another ruined stone building. The walls are crumbling, the windows are empty, and ivy has taken over nearly every inch. To most people, it's just forgotten history, but the locals know better. They say the abbey is cursed, not just haunted, cursed, that the ground it stands on has soaked up centuries of pain, that those who stay too long leave changed, or they don't leave at all. There are no gift shops or guided tours here, no tourist signs or cheerful legends, just cold wind and silence, and sometimes crying from beneath the earth. In this video, we're going to explore the terrifying history of Hollowgate Abbey, from plague-era mysteries to witch trial horrors to modern-day disappearances. Everything you're about to hear comes from old records, folklore, and first-hand accounts. Some of it may sound unbelievable. Some of it is unbelievable. But the story is real, and by the end, you might start to wonder if certain places were never meant to be touched. The story of Hollowgate Abbey begins in the year 1347, one of the darkest years in European history. This was the beginning of the Black Death, a plague that would wipe out nearly half the population of Europe. While entire villages were vanishing, a nobleman named Lord Ethelric Hollowgate funded the construction of a monastery just outside his estate, a place where monks could pray, care for the sick, and, as he put it, guard the soul of the land. But something was off from the very beginning. Construction workers reported strange setbacks. Stones would go missing overnight. Tools were found bent or broken, as if someone or something didn't want the walls to go up. There are even old journal entries from the builders that mention a woman's voice heard beneath the foundation. Still, the abbey was completed, and the monks moved in. But within just a few weeks, they started dying. Not from the plague, not from any illness that could be named. Their bodies were intact, no signs of wounds, no disease. They just stopped breathing. Records from the abbey's library reveal disturbing patterns. One monk wrote, "I hear footsteps at night. They stop at my door, but never knock." Another simply wrote, "It wants the walls empty again." And carved into the stone at the back of the altar, someone, no one knows who, etched 3 Latin words, "Non est homo." It is not human. Over the next few years, the abbey lost almost every inhabitant. The few who fled refused to speak of what they saw, and by the 1360s, Hollowgate Abbey was silent. A massive stone building, abandoned and avoided. Just a shell, but not empty. Never truly empty. By the mid-1600s, Hollowgate Abbey had already become a shadow of itself, overgrown, partially collapsed, and steeped in local fear. The plague had passed, the monks were gone, and the abbey stood as nothing more than a warning wrapped in stone. But just when the world was starting to forget the abbey, something happened that would make sure no one ever did. Her name was Agnes Hollowgate. She wasn't noble, despite sharing the same name. She wasn't powerful either. Just a young woman from a small nearby village, known mostly for her knowledge of herbs, healing, and midwifery. She was quiet, always kept to herself, but when people needed help, they came to her. Until one day, they turned on her. It started with a stillborn child, a nobleman's wife, her first pregnancy, and it ended in tragedy. Agnes was the midwife, and in a time when fear moved faster than truth, blame had to land somewhere. She was accused of witchcraft. No trial, no defense, no justice. Just a torch-lit mob, a rope, and a cruel idea. They didn't want to hang her. They didn't want to burn her. They wanted to send a message, so they dragged her, screaming, to the crumbling ruins of Hollowgate Abbey. They broke open part of the old cellar, beneath the altar, and they put her in, alive. Some say they left her with a single candle and a Bible. Others say they buried her with salt in her mouth to keep her soul from speaking. But what everyone agrees on is what happened next. For 7 nights after her burial, villagers reported hearing screams coming from the abbey. Blood-curdling, frantic screams, followed by heavy thuds on the stone floor, as if she was throwing herself against the walls trying to escape. And on the 8th day, silence. Total, unnatural silence. Not just inside the abbey, the whole area. Birds stopped singing. Animals fled. Even the wind itself seemed to hold its breath. From that moment on, the abbey changed. The air grew colder, the shadows darker, and the feeling that you were never alone. It wasn't just an old ruin anymore. It had become a tomb, a prison, and some believe Agnes was never fully buried, that her soul clings to the stones, not out of revenge, but desperation. She was innocent, and they buried her anyway. Now, her name is whispered in lullabies meant to scare children into staying indoors. Songs like, "Sleep not near Hollowgate, for she will call your name. And if you answer back, my dear, you'll never leave the same." They say if you go near the abbey at night and say her name 3 times, you won't hear an echo. You'll hear her answer. Over time, the story of Agnes Hollowgate sank deep into the bones of the nearby village, not as a chapter in a history book, but as something far more powerful, a warning woven into culture. The villagers never spoke of her openly, not in daylight, not in public, but they sang about her in whispers, in lullabies, in chants passed from mothers to children, in verses muttered by candlelight on stormy nights. At first listen, they sound like harmless rhymes, but when you really hear the words, the unease creeps in. One old nursery rhyme, still remembered by the oldest generation in the village, goes, "Lay me down near Hollowgate, but never close your eyes, for if she sees you sleeping there, she'll pull you from the sky." Another is even simpler, often sung to toddlers to keep them from wandering too far. 1 knock, 2 knock, 3 at the door. If Agnes calls, don't go to the floor. These aren't just creepy songs for effect. In a place where stories become survival, they're considered sacred. Many villagers believe the tunes aren't meant to entertain. They're meant to protect. A way to pass down unspoken rules. Don't go near the abbey after dusk. Don't say her name. And never answer if a woman you can't see whispers in your ear. Even more unsettling is the way some villagers react if you ask about Agnes directly. Most go quiet. A few get visibly uncomfortable. One elderly man, when questioned during a 1992 oral history project, reportedly stood up, removed his microphone, and said, "She hears her name. Don't say it twice, ever." The songs may sound like fiction, but in this village, they're treated like fact. Generations have lived and died in Hollowgate without setting foot near the ruins, not out of fear of ghosts, but fear of something older, angrier, and unfinished. Because legends don't live this long unless someone keeps seeing things. In the year 1791, over a century after Hollowgate Abbey had been sealed off and left to decay, a new chapter began. A wealthy aristocrat named Edmund Belgrave purchased the land and the ruins surrounding the abbey. At the time, England was in the middle of a period of change, enlightenment, expansion, and progress. Belgrave was a man of science, a skeptic. He didn't believe in ghosts, curses, or village folklore. To him, the abbey was nothing more than an opportunity, cheap land, old stone, and the perfect location for a country estate. He had the ruins cleared. What was left of the altar was demolished. Foundations were filled in. The abbey's massive stone walls were repurposed to form the bones of what would become the Belgrave Manor, a sprawling estate built directly over the heart of the original abbey. But it didn't take long for strange things to start happening. The first signs were subtle. Fires wouldn't stay lit in certain rooms. Mirrors fogged even in summer. Servants reported hearing muffled voices echoing from within the walls, especially after dark. Doors would open slowly on their own, and then slam shut hard enough to rattle the floorboards. The family dismissed these things at first. Old houses creak, new construction settles, and every estate has its quirks. But then, the children began waking up at night, screaming that a woman was watching them from the ceiling. Not the corner, not the hallway, the ceiling. They described her as pale, with black eyes and long hair that dragged along the floor as she moved. One child reportedly whispered to his mother, "She says her name is Agnes. She lives underneath us." Servants began quitting one by one. Some refused to give a reason. Others just said they were tired of the crying. After a year, Belgrave's wife left the manor entirely, taking the children with her back to London. Edmund stayed, determined to prove nothing was wrong, that all of it was just local superstition. By 1796, he was gone too. No one knows exactly what happened. His personal journals ended mid-sentence, and the manor was found completely empty. Not a single candle burned, not a single item taken. It was as if the house simply rejected them. The estate was put up for sale, but no buyers came, not one. The Belgrave family never returned, and the manor began to fall apart, just like the abbey before it. By 1800, it was abandoned. Again. Twice in 2 centuries, people had tried to build a life on that land, and both times, something pushed back. By the 1980s, Hollowgate Abbey had become a ghost story more than a location. Overgrown and nearly swallowed by the land, only a few villagers even knew exactly where it was anymore. But that didn't stop outsiders from poking around. In 1984, a small group of university students from London, part of a paranormal research society, decided to investigate the abbey for a documentary project. They'd heard the legends, they'd read about Agnes, but they were skeptics, curious, maybe a little arrogant. They brought cameras, tape recorders, EMF sensors, and spent 2 full days camping near the ruins. The group was made up of 5 people. Only 2 came back. The students arrived on a Friday morning. Locals say they were seen laughing, joking, even mocking the old stories. That first night, nothing unusual happened. But on the second night, everything changed. What little information we have comes from the 2 survivors, and even they won't speak about it anymore. One of them, a man named Marcus Doyle, gave a single interview before disappearing from the public eye. In that interview, his voice was flat, almost hollow. When asked what happened, he said, "It didn't want to hurt us. It just didn't want to be alone anymore." He refused to elaborate. The other survivor, a woman named Lee, hasn't spoken publicly since. But according to police reports, when she was found, she was barefoot, standing outside the ruins at sunrise. Her hands were covered in dirt, and she kept repeating just one word: under. The footage the group recorded? Missing. Their cameras were recovered, but all the tapes were blank, completely wiped. Equipment melted, batteries drained, film destroyed. No usable data. No explanation. Police sealed off the site the following week, citing structural danger and public safety. But villagers say it was more than that. They say something was disturbed, that the group got too close to something that wanted to stay buried. Since then, no official investigations have taken place. The abbey remains off limits. No signs, no fences, no tourist traps. Just overgrown stones and the silence of a place that should have crumbled long ago. But didn't. Because something is still inside, waiting. Even now, decades after the 1984 incident, people are still drawn to Hollowgate Abbey, and not the kind who come with notebooks and cameras. These days, it's mostly urban explorers, paranormal thrill seekers, and YouTubers chasing clicks. Most leave disappointed, but a few come back shaken, and their stories all sound strangely similar. One visitor, a solo explorer who posted anonymously online, claimed he never made it past the tree line. As he approached the ruins, he heard what sounded like a woman humming. He assumed it was another explorer, but when he stepped into the clearing, he found the place completely empty. No cars, no footprints, just that quiet, distant humming coming from under his feet. Another group of late-night explorers reported hearing footsteps on the stone behind them. They turned around. Nothing. Then again, heavier this time, closer. They described the footsteps as slow, wet, and deliberate. One of them asked, jokingly, "Agnes, is that you?" The sound stopped immediately. No more footsteps. But for the rest of the night, they all claimed to hear someone breathing, right behind them, even when they stood perfectly still. A third account is perhaps the most disturbing. It comes from a Reddit post, later deleted, written by someone who claimed to have spent a night alone in the abbey on a dare. He said he brought snacks, a flashlight, even a journal to take notes, but he never opened it, because after sunset, he heard someone whisper his name. At first he thought it was his imagination, then he heard it again, louder, firmer, in a voice he didn't recognize. He swore no one knew he was going, no one but the person who dared him, and even she didn't know his full name. The final line of his post read, "The whisper knew my name, and now I hear it every night." Whether these stories are real, exaggerated, or just the internet doing what the internet does, it doesn't matter. Because they all say the same thing: something at Hollowgate Abbey is still active. And more importantly, it's listening. They say the stones hold memory, that if pain happens in one place long enough, the ground absorbs it, remembers it, echoes it. If that's true, then Hollowgate Abbey doesn't just remember death, it remembers her. So, what is Hollowgate Abbey? A cursed patch of earth? A haunted ruin? Or just a forgotten relic twisted by centuries of rumors and fear? There are a few theories, each more unsettling than the last. Some believe the land itself is cursed, older than the abbey, older than the village, possibly once a pagan burial ground or ritual site. They point to the monks' cryptic writings and the strange Latin phrase carved into stone, "Non est homo," it is not human, as if the monks were trying to warn whoever came next. Others blame the violent death of Agnes Hollowgate, a woman wrongfully accused, buried alive, and denied peace. They say her pain became something else, that her soul, trapped beneath stone, twisted into a presence so strong it still echoes today. Not evil, but not human anymore either. Then there are the skeptics, those who say it's all folklore and fear, passed down until the story became more real than the ruin. They argue there's no proof of anything supernatural, just gaps in records, old songs, and overactive imaginations. But skeptics can't explain the matching stories from people who've never met. They can't explain the missing students, or the equipment that fails, or the names whispered in the dark. Maybe it's not one thing. Maybe it's everything. A cursed land, a haunted soul, and a structure that's soaked up so much trauma, it doesn't know how to be silent anymore. One thing is clear: something is wrong at Hollowgate Abbey, and whatever it is, it's been waiting a very, very long time. So now you've heard the story, or at least as much of it as anyone dares to tell. From the monks who died without wounds, to the girl buried beneath stone, to the students who vanished chasing proof, and the whispers that still drift from cracked walls no one dares rebuild. Hollowgate Abbey isn't just one haunting. It's not just one ghost. It's layer upon layer of fear, silence, and unanswered questions. And maybe that's why it's so powerful. Because the scariest stories aren't the ones with monsters or jump scares. They're the ones that might be true. The ones that live just beyond the edge of certainty. The ones where there's no ending. Just a place that keeps breathing long after the people are gone. And Hollowgate? It's still breathing. Even now, some say the ruins shift slightly when no one's watching. That you can hear footsteps echo through the stones if you listen long enough. And if you speak her name, Agnes Hollowgate, softly, without fear, you might hear something whisper back, not in anger, but in loneliness. Because some places don't forget, some places don't forgive, and some never let go. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.